The first bullet shattered the morning silence at 0647 hours. At Navy Hospital Corpsman Sarah, Chun knew immediately that someone had sold them out. She hit the dirt as concrete exploded around her, instinctively rolling toward the nearest cover while her mind processed the tactical nightmare unfolding. The compound was supposed to be empty, abandoned for months, according to intelligence reports. Instead, muzzle flashes erupted from at least 6 positions, turning their routine medical supply run into a killing field. Contact left. Contact right. The shouts echoed across the courtyard as SEAL Team 7 scattered for cover. Chun pressed herself against a crumbling wall, her medical pack heavy against her spine, and watched Commander Jake Morrison sprint toward her position. The man moved like liquid death even under fire, his Barrett .50 caliber rifle clutched in both hands. But Chun could see the dark stain spreading across his left shoulder. Morrison dove behind her wall just as another burst of automatic fire chewed chunks from the concrete above their heads. "Chun," he barked, his voice tight with pain. "How bad is it?" She was already moving, her hands finding the wound before her eyes did. The shrapnel had torn through the meat of his deltoid, missing the major arteries but shredding muscle fibers like confetti. Blood pulsed between her fingers, not arterial, but steady enough to be dangerous. "You'll live, sir," she lied smoothly, applying direct pressure while her mind calculated blood loss rates. At this pace, he had maybe 20 minutes before shock set in. But that assumed they'd be alive in 20 minutes, which seemed increasingly unlikely. The Barrett clattered against the concrete as Morrison's grip weakened. Chun's eyes flicked to the massive rifle, then back to his face. Something cold twisted in her stomach, not fear, but recognition. She knew that weapon intimately, had felt its recoil against her shoulder more times than she cared to remember. "Medic!" The scream came from across the courtyard. Petty Officer Rodriguez was down, clutching his leg while blood pooled beneath him. Chun started to move, but Morrison's good hand clamped around her wrist. "Stay put," he ordered. "You move across that courtyard, you're dead." As if to emphasize his point, a sniper's bullet cracked past their position, close enough that Chun felt the displacement of air against her cheek. She pressed herself lower, her trained eyes automatically tracking the shot's trajectory. 3rd floor, Eastern Building, approximately 400 meters. The angle was wrong for a clean shot at their current position. But if they moved— "Sir, I count 3 sniper positions," she said quietly, surprising herself with how easily the tactical assessment came. Eastern Building, 3rd floor. Western rooftop, behind the water tank. "And there's a 3rd one somewhere in the—" Another shot rang out, and Petty Officer Kim dropped like a stone 30 feet away. No scream this time, just the wet sound of a body hitting concrete. "Southern Complex," Chun finished, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her veins. "Probably 2nd floor, corner room. Good overlapping fields of fire. Professional setup." Morrison stared at her, his pain-glazed eyes sharpening with something that might have been suspicion. "How the hell do you know that?" Before Chun could answer, the radio crackled to life. "Overwatch, this is Bravo 7. We are taking heavy fire at the LZ. Multiple casualties. Extraction is compromised." Say again, extraction is compromised. Chun felt Morrison's body tense against hers. Without air support, without extraction, they were trapped in a concrete maze with professional killers who knew exactly where they were. She reached for her medical bag, pulling out pressure bandages and hemostatic agents, but her movements felt mechanical, distant. "Chun." Morrison's voice was quieter now, more focused. "You're not just a medic, are you?" She kept working on his wound, avoiding his eyes. "Hospital Corpsman 2nd Class Sarah Chun, sir. Assigned to SEAL Team 7 for medical support." "That's not what I asked." Another burst of gunfire erupted from the western position, followed by the distinctive crack of a precision rifle. Chen's head snapped up involuntarily, her body reading the sound signature like a familiar song. 308 Winchester. Probably a Remington 700. Decent weapon. But the shooter was rushing his shots. Amateur Dot Morrison caught the look on her face. Jesus Christ. You know weapons? I know medicine, sir. But even as she said it, Chung was calculating distances, wind speed, elevation differences. The Eastern sniper had the best position elevated, protected, clear sight lines to most of the courtyard. Take him out first, then the Western shooter, then hunt for the third position. 3 shots, maybe 4, if she missed. The Barrett could do it, had the range and stopping power, but the angle was tricky from their current position. She shook her head violently, forcing the tactical thoughts away. That wasn't who she was anymore. That wasn't who she wanted to be. Rodriguez is bleeding out, she said instead, nodding toward the wounded SEAL. I need to get to him. Negative. You move, you die. That's an order. Chum bit back her response, focusing on Morrison's wound instead. The bleeding was slowing, but his face was getting pale. Shock was setting in faster than she'd calculated. She needed to get him stabilized, needed to reach the other wounded, needed to... The radio crackled again. Bravo 7, this is Overwatch. Enemy reinforcements moving to your position. Estimate 12 to 15 hostiles, ETA 5 minutes. You need to move now. Morrison tried to push himself up, grimaced, and fell back against the wall. Shit, Chun, how many wounded do we have? She did a quick visual sweep of the courtyard. Rodriguez, leg wound, conscious but losing blood. Kim is... She paused, studying the motionless form. Kim's gone, sir. Headshot. Clean kill. The words came out clinical, professional, and Morrison's eyes narrowed further. You sound like you've seen this before. Chum's hand stilled on his bandage. For just a moment, she was somewhere else, a different desert, a different war, a different version of herself crouched behind different cover with a different rifle in her hands. The memory tasted like copper and cordite. We all have, sir, she said finally. Afghanistan changes everyone. But Morrison wasn't buying it. She could see him putting pieces together, reading the signs she thought she'd buried. The way she moved under fire. The way she read the battlefield. The way she knew exactly where each sniper was positioned without using optics. Chun, he said quietly, I need you to tell me the truth. Right now. Because in about 4 minutes, we're going to be overrun, and I need to know what assets I have. She met his eyes for the first time since the shooting started. In them, she saw the same recognition she'd been fighting, the acknowledgement of what she really was beneath the medic's uniform. Hospital Corpsman Second Class Sarah Chun, she repeated. But her voice was different now, harder. Formerly Staff Sergeant Sarah Chun, 75th Ranger Regiment. Sniper qualified. 47 confirmed kills across 3 deployments. Morrison nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already suspected. His good hand moved toward the Barrett, fingers wrapping around the stock. And why, he asked, is a Ranger sniper playing medic with my team? Chem's hands resumed their work on his wound, but her eyes were already tracking movement in the eastern building. Because I got tired of killing people, sir. I wanted to save them instead. Morrison followed her gaze, saw what she was seeing. Looks like you might not have a choice. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed off the compound walls. Chum checked her watch. 3 minutes until the reinforcements arrived. 3 minutes to decide who she really was. The sound of diesel engines grew louder, echoing off the concrete walls like approaching thunder. Chun finished securing Morrison's bandage and peered around the corner of their cover. 3 technical vehicles were racing toward the compound's main entrance, each mounted with heavy machine guns and packed with armed fighters. Shit, Morrison muttered, following her gaze. "How long do we have?" 2 minutes, maybe less." Chun's voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd calculated these odds before. "They'll dismount at the gate, sweep the perimeter, then move in coordinated teams. Standard insurgent tactics." Morrison studied her face. "You sound like you've briefed this scenario." Before Chun could respond, Rodriguez's voice cut across the courtyard, weak but urgent. "Medic, I'm losing feeling in my leg." Chun started to move, but Morrison's hand shot out, gripping her arm. "I told you, he's going into shock," she interrupted, her medical training overriding everything else. "If I don't get to him in the next 60 seconds, he's going to bleed out. And if you cross that courtyard, the Eastern sniper will put a bullet through your skull." Chun looked at the 30 yards of open ground between their position and Rodriguez. The wounded SEAL had dragged himself behind a low concrete barrier, but it wouldn't stop a rifle round. Blood was pooling beneath him, dark and spreading. "Cover me," she said, already shifting her weight. "Negative. That's suicide. Then he dies." Morrison's grip tightened. "Better one than two." Chum turned to face him fully, and Morrison saw something in her eyes that made him release her arm. It wasn't fear or determination. It was the cold calculation of someone weighing acceptable losses. "Sir," she said quietly, "with respect, you don't know what I'm capable of." Before Morrison could respond, Chun was moving. But instead of sprinting directly across the courtyard, she did something that defied every tactical manual Morrison had ever read. She ran in a serpentine pattern, but not randomly. Each direction change came precisely as muzzle flashes erupted from the sniper positions. She was reading their shots, anticipating their aim, moving like she could see the bullets before they were fired. The Eastern sniper fired twice, both shots missing by inches. The Western shooter got off one round that sparked off concrete where Chun had been a heartbeat before. By the time the third sniper acquired her, she was already sliding into cover beside Rodriguez. Morrison stared in disbelief. In 15 years of special operations, he'd never seen anyone move like that under precision fire. It wasn't luck, it was skill so refined it looked like magic. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez gasped as Chun's hands found his wound. "How did you—" "Shut up and let me work." Chun's voice was all business as she assessed the damage. The bullet had torn through his femoral muscle, missing the artery by millimeters. Painful and bloody, but not immediately fatal if she could stop the bleeding. "Chun." Morrison's voice carried across the courtyard. 30 seconds. She could hear the vehicles now, engines shutting down, doors slamming, voices shouting in Arabic. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, applying a tourniquet and pressure bandage while her mind tracked the approaching threat. "Rodriguez, can you move?" "I think so." "Hurts like hell, but good. When I say go, you crawl toward Morrison's position. Stay low, move fast." Rodriguez nodded, his face pale but determined. Chun checked her watch. The reinforcements would be through the gate any second. She needed to get back to Morrison, needed to help coordinate their defense, but something was nagging at her. The sniper positions were too perfect, too coordinated. This wasn't a random ambush. "Go," she whispered to Rodriguez, then began her own movement back across the courtyard. This time, the snipers were ready for her. The first shot came before she'd covered 10 yards, close enough to spray concrete fragments across her face. The second shot punched through the air where her head had been a split second before. Chun Dove rolled, came up running, but she could feel them tracking her, adjusting their aim. The third shot never came. Instead, she heard the distinctive boom of Morrison's sidearm, followed by a scream from the eastern building. Chun looked back to see Morrison propped against the wall, his Sig Sauer smoking in his good hand. "Suppressive fire," he shouted. "Move!" Chun sprinted the last 15 yards and slammed into cover beside him, breathing hard. "Nice shot, sir." "Didn't hit him," Morrison admitted. "But I got his attention." He was studying her face again, that calculating look she was beginning to recognize. "Chun, what you just did, that's not something they teach in medic school." Before she could answer, the compound erupted in chaos. The reinforcements had arrived, and they weren't taking any chances. Automatic weapons fire raked their position, forcing both of them to press against the concrete. Chun could hear boots on gravel, voices coordinating in Arabic, the metallic click of weapons being readied. "They're flanking us," she said, identifying the movement patterns by sound alone. "Two teams, moving east and west. They'll have us surrounded in 90 seconds. Morrison nodded grimly. "Rodriguez, how you doing over there?" "Still breathing, sir," came the reply from their left. "But I'm not going anywhere fast." Morrison looked at his Barrett, then at his wounded arm. He tried to lift the rifle, grimaced, and let it fall back to the concrete. "Fuck, I can't make the shot." Chun's eyes fixed on the massive rifle. The Barrett M8201, she knew its specifications by heart. Effective range over a mile, .50 OBMG rounds that could punch through concrete blocks. In the right hands, it could end this fight in seconds. "Sir," she said carefully, "what about Petty Officer Kim?" "He was your designated marksman." Morrison's face darkened. "Kim's dead. Headshot, remember? Professional work." He paused, studying the sniper positions. "Which leaves us with a problem. I count 3 shooters in elevated positions, plus however many are about to come through that gate. We're outgunned, outmanned, and trapped." The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. Chun could hear them communicating, coordinating their assault. 30 seconds, maybe less. Morrison made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Chun," he said quietly, sliding the Barrett toward her. "I know you can shoot. I've seen how you move, how you read a battlefield. That's not medic training." Chun stared at the rifle like it was a venomous snake. "Sir, I'm just a bullshit." Morrison's voice cut through her protest like a blade. "I don't know what your story is, but right now, I don't care. 3 snipers, 3 shots. Do it now, or we all die here." Chun's hands trembled as she looked at the weapon. She could feel the weight of it, remember the familiar kick against her shoulder, the satisfaction of a clean kill at impossible range. Everything she'd tried to leave behind, everything she'd sworn she'd never do again. "I became a medic to save lives," she whispered. Morrison's good hand found her shoulder. "Then save ours." The footsteps were almost at their position now. Chun could hear safety catches being released, final preparations for assault. In 10 seconds, armed fighters would round their corner, and it would all be over. She reached for the Barrett. "Take my Barrett," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of command and desperation in equal measure. "End this." Chun's fingers closed around the stock, and she felt something cold and familiar wake up inside her chest. "Continue." The Barrett M8201 felt like coming home. Chun's hands moved with muscle memory she'd tried to bury. Checking the chamber, confirming the magazine, adjusting the bipod legs with the fluid precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The rifle weighed 28 pounds, but in her grip it felt weightless, an extension of her will made manifest in steel and polymer. "How many rounds?" she asked, her voice already different, colder, more focused. 5 in the mag, 1 in the chamber," Morrison replied, watching her transformation with a mixture of awe and unease. The nervous medic was disappearing before his eyes. Replaced by something predatory and calculating, Chun settled into a prone position behind the concrete barrier. The Barrett stock finding the familiar hollow of her shoulder. Through the scope, the world compressed into a circle of magnified clarity. She could see everything now, the Eastern sniper's position in the third-floor window, the muzzle of his rifle just visible behind a concrete pillar. Range: 387 meters. Wind: negligible. Elevation: minimal adjustment needed. "Cover me for 30 seconds, she whispered, and Morrison heard something in her tone that made his blood run cold. This wasn't the woman who'd been treating his wounds 5 minutes ago. This was someone else entirely. Morrison opened fire with his sidearm, sending rounds toward the Eastern building. The shots weren't meant to hit. They were meant to distract. To make the sniper focus on the muzzle, flashes from Morrison's position instead of the scope. Glint from Chun's. Chun's breathing shifted into the rhythm she'd learned in a different life. 4 counts in, hold for 2, 4 counts out. Her heart rate slowed, her vision sharpened, and the chaos around her faded to white noise. In the scope, she could see the Eastern sniper adjusting his position, trying to get a better angle on Morrison. The crosshairs settled on the small gap between the concrete pillar and the window frame. Chun could see part of the sniper's shoulder, maybe 6 inches of exposed target. At this range, with this weapon, it should have been impossible. Should have been. Chun exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared like thunder. The .50 BMG round, leaving the muzzle at 2,800 feet per second. The recoil drove the rifle back against her shoulder with familiar violence. But Chen was already working the bolt, chambering the next round. Through the scope, she watched the Eastern sniper's rifle tumble from the window, followed by a spray of blood against the concrete wall. 1 down. The Western sniper had heard the shot and was swinging his rifle toward her position. Chun could see him through the scope now, crouched behind a water tank on the rooftop, maybe 450 meters away. He was good, his movement was controlled, professional. But he was also predictable. Chun shifted her aim, leading the target as he moved. The sniper was trying to get an angle around the water tank, exposing himself for just a moment as he repositioned. Chun waited, her finger resting lightly on the trigger, until he committed to the movement. The second shot came 3 heartbeats after the first. The .50 caliber round punched through the water tank like tissue paper and found its target on the other side. The Western sniper's rifle clattered to the rooftop as his body crumpled behind the tank. 2 down. But the third sniper had been watching, learning. Chun heard the crack of his rifle a split second before the bullet sparked off to concrete inches from her head. He'd found her position, and he was good enough to make the shot count. Chun rolled left, coming up in a new firing position 20 feet away. Through the scope, she could see muzzle flashes from the southern building, but the sniper was being smart, firing and moving, never staying in one position long enough for her to acquire him. "Chun." Morrison's voice cut through her focus. "Reinforcements are through the gate. 30 seconds. She could hear them now, boots on concrete, voices shouting orders in Arabic, the metallic rattle of weapons being readied. The assault teams were moving into position, and once they reached the courtyard, it would be over. She needed to end this now. The third sniper fired again, the bullet passing close enough that Chun felt the shockwave against her cheek. But this time, she was ready for it. She'd been tracking his muzzle flashes, calculating his position based on the angle and timing of his shots. Second floor, corner room, just like she'd predicted. But he was mobile, moving between 2 windows to avoid counter-fire. Chun made a decision that would have been impossible for anyone else. Instead of waiting for him to expose himself, she was going to force him to. She put the crosshairs on the concrete wall between the 2 windows and fired. The .50 BMG round didn't just punch through the concrete. It obliterated it. Chunks of masonry exploded inward, filling the room with debris and dust. For a moment, everything was chaos. Then Chun saw him. The sniper stumbled into view at the eastern window, disoriented by the blast, his rifle swinging wildly as he tried to reacquire her position. He was good, but he'd made a fatal mistake, he'd assumed. She was trying to kill him with that shot. She hadn't been. She'd been hurting him. Chun's final shot was perfect. The bullet caught the sniper center mass as he appeared in the window, the impact lifting him off his feet and slamming him back into the darkness of the room. His rifle tumbled to the courtyard below, clattering against the concrete. 3 down. Silence fell over the compound like a physical weight. Even the approaching assault teams had stopped moving, stunned by the sudden elimination of their overwatch. Chun worked the bolt one final time, chambering her last round. But the scope showed only empty windows and abandoned positions. Jesus Christ, Morrison breathed, staring at her with something approaching reverence. 3 shots. 3 kills. At those ranges, Chun set the Barrett down carefully, her hands already reaching for her medical kit. The transformation was jarring. One moment she was a precision instrument of death. The next, she was back to being a medic, checking on wounded teammates. But Morrison could see the cost in her eyes. Her hands were shaking now, not from adrenaline but from something deeper. The weight of what she'd just done, what she'd been forced to become again. "Rodriguez, how are you holding up?" She called out, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Still breathing, Doc. That was some shooting." Chun didn't respond. She was listening to the sounds from beyond the gate, confused voices. Engines starting, the general chaos of an assault force that had just lost its tactical advantage. They'd be regrouping, calling for backup, but it would take time. Time they could use. Morrison was studying her face, seeing past the medic's mask to the soldier beneath. "Sarah Chun," he said quietly. "That's not your real name, is it?" Chun met his eyes for the first time since picking up the rifle. In them, Morrison saw something that made him understand why she'd tried so hard to leave this life behind. "It is now," she said simply, but they both knew that some ghosts never stayed buried. The sound of rotor blades cut through the morning air like salvation itself. Chun looked up from Rodriguez's leg wound to see 2 Black Hawks cresting the compound walls, their door gunners already laying down suppressive fire on the scattered enemy positions. The cavalry had arrived, but Chun felt no relief, only the hollow emptiness that always followed the killing. "Extraction in 2 minutes." Morrison shouted over the noise, struggling to his feet with his good arm. "Chun, how's Rodriguez?" "Stable," she replied, securing the last of his bandages. "He'll need surgery, but he'll make it." Her voice was clinical, professional, but Morrison could see the tremor in her hands as she packed her medical kit. The assault teams beyond the gate had scattered when the helicopters appeared, melting back into the urban maze like smoke. Chun watched them go through the Barrett's scope one final time, her finger resting on the trigger. 3 more targets. Easy shots. But she lifted her eye from the scope and safed the weapon instead. "Chun," Morrison's voice was quiet, meant only for her. "We need to talk." She didn't look at him, focusing instead on helping Rodriguez to his feet. "Nothing to talk about, sir." Mission accomplished. "Bullshit." Morrison grabbed her arm, forcing her to meet his eyes. "What I just witnessed, that wasn't luck. That wasn't beginner skill. Those were the shots of someone who's done this before. A lot." Chun pulled free from his grip, but she couldn't escape the weight of his stare. Around them, the extraction team was setting up a perimeter, medics rushing toward the wounded. In 60 seconds, they'd be airborne, and this nightmare would be over. But Morrison's questions would follow her. "Staff Sergeant Sarah Chun," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authority of command. 75th Ranger Regiment. Sniper qualified. 47 confirmed kills. He paused, studying her reaction. "Make that 50 now." Chun's hands stilled on her medical pack. "How did you—" "I ran your prints through the system while you were playing Dead Eye." Morrison held up his tactical tablet, showing her military record on the screen. Impressive reading. 3 tours in Afghanistan. Silver Star, Purple Heart. And then, he scrolled down. Medical discharge. Psychological evaluation recommended. Transferred to Navy Medical Corps under a new identity. The helicopter was landing now, its downdraft whipping dust and debris across the courtyard. Chun could see the extraction team moving toward them, stretchers ready for the wounded. Soon she'd be back on base, back to her quiet life as just another medic. But the Barrett M82, A1 lying beside her told a different story. Why? Morrison asked, his voice barely audible over the rotor noise. Why give up everything to become a medic? Chen was quiet for a long moment, watching the medical team work on Kim's body. Even in death, they treated him with dignity, with care. It was what she'd wanted to be part of, the saving instead of the taking. Because I was too good at it, she said finally. The killing. It stopped feeling like war and started feeling like hunting. She looked at Morrison, and he saw something broken in her eyes. Do you know what it's like to be so good at taking lives that it becomes routine? To calculate wind speed and bullet drop while eating breakfast? To see a crowded marketplace and automatically identify the best sniper positions? Morrison nodded slowly. He'd seen it before operators who'd crossed a line they couldn't come back from. So you walked away. I tried to. Chun's laugh was bitter. Changed my name, my service record, my entire identity. Became Sarah Chun, Navy medic. Dedicated to saving lives instead of ending them. She gestured at the Barrett. But you can't really walk away, can you? It's always there, waiting. The extraction team reached them, medics immediately taking over Rodriguez's care. Chun stepped back, letting them work, but Morrison caught her arm again. Chun Sarah, whatever your name is. What you did today saved my team. Saved all of us. I know. Her voice was flat, emotionless. And that's what scares me. As they loaded Rodriguez onto a stretcher, Chun found herself staring at the 3 buildings where her targets had fallen. 51 confirmed kills now. The number felt like a weight around her neck, dragging her back toward a darkness she'd fought so hard to escape. Sir, one of the extraction medics called out. We need to move. Intel says more hostiles are en route. Morrison nodded, then turned back to Chun. This stays between us. The official report will say Kim took out the snipers before he was killed. You were just doing your job as a medic. Chun looked at him in surprise. Why? Because everyone deserves a second chance. Even ghosts. Morrison's expression softened slightly. But Chun, if you ever want to talk about this, about what happened today, my door's open. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight with ourselves. They boarded the helicopter in silence, Chun taking a seat beside Rodriguez's stretcher. As the Black Hawk lifted off, she watched the compound shrink below them, the 3 buildings becoming tiny squares in an urban maze. Somewhere down there, 3 men lay dead by her hand. 3 more names to add to a list she'd tried so hard to forget. Rodriguez stirred on the stretcher, his eyes finding hers. Doc, he said weakly. That shooting. Where do you learn to do that? Chun met his gaze, seeing the same question she'd been running from for 2 years. YouTube, she said with a slight smile. Amazing what you can learn online these days. Rodriguez laughed despite his pain, and the moment passed. But Chun could feel Morrison watching her from across the cabin, could see the wheels turning in his mind. He knew her secret now, knew what she really was beneath the medic's uniform dot as they flew back toward base. Chun closed her eyes and tried to find a peace she'd been seeking when she traded her rifle for a medical kit. But all she could see were muzzle flashes and falling bodies. The eternal dance of death that had defined her for so long. The helicopter banked toward home, carrying its cargo of wounded warriors and buried secrets. In the official reports, Hospital Corpsman Second-Class Sarah Chung would be commended for her medical care under fire. The sniper kills would be attributed to the fallen Kim. Another hero story for the history books. But Morrison would remember the truth. He'd remember the woman who transformed from healer to killer and back again in the space of minutes. He'd remember the ghost who'd emerged when death came calling, then disappeared back into the shadows of a carefully constructed new life. And Chen would carry the weight of those 3 shots for the rest of her days, knowing that no matter how far she ran or how many lives she saved, part of her would always be that sniper on the rooftop, calculating wind speed and bullet drop, waiting for the next target to appear in her crosshairs. Some ghosts, she realized, never truly died. They just learned to hide better. The helicopter disappeared into the morning sky, carrying its secrets toward an uncertain future, where the line between salvation and damnation remained as thin as a sniper's crosshairs. The end.